Hello and welcome to another video for the yearbook. Today we will talk about Federation Navy Comet. Comet is the most popular frigate in faction warfare. It's actually by far the most popular frigate. As you can see, more than 12,000 engagements than the second frigate, which is the Hookbill. So it's important to understand this frigate well, because even if you don't fly it, you will fight against it all the time. There are two main reasons why this ship is so popular. First, it's very easy to fit and fly, and second, it's actually quite good. As you can see on the right, Comet it has the second highest win rate among all Navy frigates. So the only Navy frigate that's higher is Navy Vigil. In recent years, the win rate for the Comet slightly reduced since the introduction of Navy destroyers. Comet slightly lost part of the engagement profile where it was particularly strong, because nowadays many people that prefer to fly brawling ships, they just pick Navy destroyers, and it's quite hard to fight a Navy destroyer in a Comet. So for Navy frigates, the meta slightly shifted towards more control-oriented frigates like Navy Vigil, and they show slightly better performance than before, and Comet shows slightly worse performance than before, because Comet is very straightforward frigate. You just get in the optimal range and then you win the DPS race. But it's still, as you can see, clearly at the very worst, the second Navy frigate in the game right now. Next, let's look at profile and performance for this ship. Even though Comet has only 3 medium slots, it can perform in many different roles very well. The most popular one is the Blaster Brawler, with Afterburner, Web Scrum, and blasters in high slots. The second most popular is the Scrum Kiter, so essentially the same feat with rails in high slots. And you can also make a very strong anti-kiter by replacing Afterburner with Macro Warp Drive and using blasters in high slots. Comet actually has very good base speed. The problem with control is that it only has 3 medium slots, so you can only fit propulsion module, tackle, and one web. And typically in the League of Navy frigates, most ships will have 4 modules for control instead of 3. So this is the biggest weakness for the Comet, is the weak control. And because your base speed is quite good, you can actually make kiting fit work. So this will be something like Micro Warp Drive, Warp Disruptor, Cap Booster plus rails in high slots. It's not the best kiter amongst Navy frigates, obviously, but it is quite decent, and it works well against the meta, because the majority of people will expect brawling blaster comets, and they will not meet you on the warping. And this is probably the biggest problem for strong but predictable kiters like Slicer, because they have a very hard time engaging out of position. In a Comet it will be much easier, because people will not fight you, will not try to meet you at the beacon. In general, tank is very good, and it's very reliable tank as well. Comet, you just hull tank the Comet, you fit damage control and then 3 hull rigs, and you get more than 7,000 effective hit points just from that. And you don't need to worry about anything, because in any case your opponent will have to grind for all of this 7,000+ effective hit points. The damage is as usual with blast frigates is very good. You can reach up to 400 DPS quite easily. And as I said, the only problem is control. Now, as for performance, the majority of your engagement profile is Navy frigates. There are many matchups and tricks here. This is not really a topic of this video. The main takeaway is that Comet generally can engage any Navy frigate in the game, and on average you will have a pretty decent win rate. Here you can see it's about 55%. In my experience, is probably even a bit higher, maybe close to 60, but in any case, it's good enough. Now, Tech 1 frigates, generally they cannot do much unless you fight against some very control-oriented frigate or against a frigate that essentially hard counters you. So if you are, for example, in an Afterburner Comet and you fight a kiting Condor, when you will have trouble. But in general, Tech 1 frigates also suffer from poor control. They rarely can fit more than one web, and in this case it comes down to tank and DPS, and Comet is obviously better. Now, Tech 1 destroyers, they are all in your engagement profile. I would say the win rate is not as high as you can see here, because many new players and farmers use Tech 1 destroyers in faction warfare, and it kind of inflates the win rate for everyone else. I would say in my experience it's probably between 60 and 70%, but in any case the main conclusion is that you can engage any Tech 1 destroyer in a Comet. And the final large enough type of ships, group of ships, is Navy destroyers. As I said in the beginning of this video, Navy destroyers are quite difficult because they essentially fill the same role as the Comet, so high tank, high damage, poor control, and you need, if you want to fight in a ship with worse tank and worse damage, you need better control to mitigate all the damage coming from the Navy destroyer. And Comet can't really do that. You can fly kiting comets, you can use scrum kiting comets against some close range Navy destroyer in position. In this case it will kind of work, but in general these matchups are quite unfavorable for the Comet. Alright, let's look at the most popular feats, and we will start with Blaster Comet. You will see this feat all the time in faction warfare. This is the most popular feat, I think, in faction warfare in general, and in frigates especially. The feat is very straightforward. Afterburner, scrum, web and medium slots, blasters in high slots, tank and DPS in low slots, and you feed typically 3 bulkheads for the tank. This Comet is essentially whole tanked. You can use Tech 1 bulkheads, but the general consensus is that Tech 2 bulkheads are sufficient value for money for the Comet. Drones can be either 2 packs of damage drones. I prefer 1 pack of damage drones and 1 pack of ECM drones. I will explain the reason in a bit. So as you can see, the tank and DPS are exceptionally high. No other Navy frigate can win the DPS races against Blaster Comet in optimal range. So really, when you fight against a Comet in a different Navy frigate, you need to mitigate damage with range. And the biggest problem with Comets in general, and this feat in particular, is weak control. So you only have 1 web, and even though your base speed is pretty good, it's generally still not sufficient to have a control in Navy frigate against Navy frigate fights. So there are a couple of ways to mitigate that. Well, of course, the easiest way is to just fight in position, and in position this fit is fine against anything, actually. But if you fight out of position against frigates with better control, against Hubel, for example, which is the second most popular frigate, then you generally need to come up with some tricks to kind of get better control. One of the tricks is to use ECM drones. The second trick is to fit an overdrive instead of one of the max tabs, because even with one max tab, Comet is still very competitive in terms of tank to DPS, so you just get more control instead of DPS. Another very popular trick is to fit two webs without Scrum. This is one of the feats that you need to be aware of when fighting comets, because this is very popular, and these comets are very hard to deal. Of course, you can leave, but if you want to kill them, it's not that easy. And if you fight against web kiters or kiters, another good thing about this feat is that you can simply swap Afterburner for a macro warp drive, and you get a pretty decent anti-kiter or anti-web kiter. Some people I know actually use macro warp drive as the main feat for the Comet, because it gives you a lot of mobility around the grid, so you generally can just fly around and commit only when you feel like the time is appropriate. With an afterburner, you generally have to commit immediately. The downside, of course, is that if you fight against Scrum Kiter with heavy control, this is essentially a hard counter to you, and there is nothing you can do. There are no tricks, like ECM isn't likely to help you that much. Overdrive is definitely not gonna help you. Two webs not gonna help you, so it's just a hard counter. But if you know what you're doing, it makes sense, even as a main fit. Okay, so next, you can refit this standard fit into a Scrum by simply swapping blasters to railguns. You will need to downgrade a couple of modules to meta, because it doesn't quite work, but in general it's the same baseline fit, so you only need to carry a couple of refits. You need to fit a newt for this fit to protect yourself against frigates with better control that will break your tracking at close range. So if you don't have a newt, any Tech 1 attack frigates, some Tech 1 frigates with two webs, and the majority of Navy frigates can simply set orbit 500 and you will not be able to track them. And you will not be able to burn away from them, because they will have a control. So you need to protect yourself at this close range with a newt. If a fight goes just Scrum Kiter against Scrum Kiter, you just don't use the newt. But you need it as a protection against signature tanking. So these are the most popular feats. You will see, I would say, blasters about like 60 to 70% of the time, and rails about 30 to 40% of the time. Very occasionally you will meet a kiting comet, which is viable but not that great. It mostly works well because firstly, people expect comets to brawl with blasters, and secondly, if you want to go after some of the destroyers that you can't kill in straight DPS races. So in this case, again, the fit is very straightforward. Low slots are essentially the same. For medium slots, you fit a kiting combo, so it's macro warp drive, warp disruptor, and cap booster, because you need something to fuel your cap. And for high slots, you use largest railguns with typically uranium ammo. You can go one step further if you want a bit more range. And rigs are either triple rigs for optimal range or double rigs for optimal range plus polycarbon. Both work fine. You can also drop one of the max tabs for tracking enhancer, and in this case you can fit tech to damage control. You will get a bit more range as well, but a bit less damage. Again, it's practically the same thing. Anything works depending on your preferences. So this one works well, but it's not, of course, the best kiter among faction frigates. So you can keep it in mind as a surprise weapon for your PvP in faction warfare. Okay, this is all popular and strong feats for the Comet. I hope you found it useful, and I will see you in the next videos.